All right, my friends, welcome in behind the scenes of Vision Pros Live. I have Anne Maxson behind stage. We have never met before. We have talked via email thanks to a wonderful recommendation from Jay Setchell. I don't know if this will be produced as an episode or not. That's kind of the point of this conversation and this style. I see Anne nodding her head politely in the background. She has her own podcast as well. She's a pharmacist, and she's probably got a whole lot to her story. We have some overlap that we're going to be talking about. This is more for her and myself than for you guys originally. But of course, if we decide to release this, you get to see behind the scenes of organic preparation for a podcast. So her podcast is Pebbles of Light Podcast, and her written story says in both her professional life as a pharmacist and founder of a company to improve patient care, as well as through her creative outlet of her podcast, she strives to live her life as an instrument in the hands of God. This has often looked different in these different areas of interest, but the common denominator is a desire to bless those around her through her impactful work. I align very wholeheartedly with that. Most of you already know who have listened before. And those of you who refer to the universe or are atheists or maybe are agnostic, that's okay. We can respect that as well. And we hope that you respect our beliefs, and then we all come together to learn, because at the end of the day, we've all got one small paradigm and vision of what life could be. And there are lots of ways to look at it. So without further ado, Anne Maxson, welcome into Vision Pros.
Hey, thanks, Jackson. I'm so glad to be here.
Where are you based out of?
I'm in Boise now. That's
Boise. Very
where we
good.
settled. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I'm down in Ecuador, from San Antonio, Texas. Where are you from?
I'm originally from northern Minnesota, so a little town called Grand Rapids. Nobody knows it. They always think Michigan, but the one in Minnesota is the birthplace of Judy Garland. That's kind of our claim to
Oh,
fame.
nice. There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and again, we'll have an open conversation. Again, we'll see if we publish this or not. It's ultimately going to come down to your call. We might use clips out of it as well. There's lots of opportunity. You'll have access to it. So, yes, Jay Setchell got us connected, and you served a mission for the LDS Church, right?
Correct.
Okay. I want
Yep.
to make sure I'm pulling the right person together. That would be like, oh no, what if it's somebody else? So cool. And where did you serve again?
Richmond, Virginia, Spanish speaking.
Richmond, Virginia, Spanish speaking, and I served in Uruguay.
Yep.
And we served several years ago. It was really neat to see your celebration post regarding that.
Yeah,
So,
just think about it, like in kind of the bio that I'd sent over to talking about wanting to be an instrument. That kind of like goes back a lot to my mission, because when I went on my mission, I was a pretty recent convert, and so it was
oh,
kind
wow.
of a cool kind of experience how that worked out.
That's awesome. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to shift gears? Do you have questions for me about the show? We can go in any direction you want. This is about your vision, not mine. So I'm
Yeah,
open.
we could talk about that a little bit. Like I was just kind of thinking about that idea of that desire to be an instrument, and I think it kind of started actually in high school. I had a really good friend, and she and I decided we were very presumptuous, and we thought we were going to go out and find the cure for cancer. And
Me too.
I know,
I literally I had the same exact ambition.
really, yeah. And so
Yes.
we are like, oh, I want to find the cure for cancer. And so we graduated high school, went off to our undergrads. We were both pre med. I realized shortly thereafter that bodily fluids kind of gross me out, and so maybe going to med school might not be a smart move. And so instead I decided I would get a PhD in cancer biology. And so I finished up my undergrad, applied for, like, my dream program was at Northwestern University in Chicago, got into Northwestern, went down there, started their cancer bio program, but it still just kind of felt not quite right. And I'd grown up in the Lutheran church and had kind of a faith background, but not super strong. So I get down to Chicago, I'm feeling a little bit lost. And I remember kneeling down and saying a prayer out loud, which I never did. And I said, "Hey, God, like, I just want to do what's best, like, in the world. How can I have the greatest impact?" And so if that is, being a busboy at the fast food chain, I'll do it, but let me know. And I don't know if this program that I'm in right now is what I should be doing. And so said the prayer and then just kind of moved on, kind of looking around at different PhD programs, thinking if I would want to switch to a different program. And so then lo and behold, I reached out to a friend of mine that I'd gone to Bible camp with when we were kids. And I said, "Hey, what'd you decide to do with your math degree?" And he's like, "Oh, I wasn't sure what to do with my math degree. And so a buddy and I moved to Utah to work on the bobsled track for the 2002 Olympics." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. How's Utah? Like, isn't that like, are there like Mennonites there? There's like some religion that's popular in Utah, but and I can't remember what it is." And he's like, "Well, actually, it's the Mormons. And actually, I've been going to their church. And it's a lot, there's a lot based on what we grew up with. It just adds a bit more to the story. And you should check it out." And so I had this thought of, okay, like it was kind of half like I'm intrigued and half what is he getting himself into?
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted to start learning more about the church. Went to Borders Bookstore on February 5th, 2001, and was no 2002, February 5th, 2002. It was the 1 year anniversary of when I tore my ACL. So it's like, oh, I deserve a present for making it this far. And so I went to Borders to try and find a Book of Mormon. And they were like the $40 family version. And I was like, I can't afford that. And so figure I'd find one some other way. And so all in the meantime, I was kind of looking at different, grad school programs, trying to follow these ideas of what should I be doing with my career, and ended up finding one at the University of Rochester in upstate New York. It was toxicology. So not so much finding the cure for cancer, but maybe making it so less people get cancer was kind of how I reasoned it in my mind. And
Right.
so I had grad school interviews over there. So I flew out over there, and I was like, I wonder if there's ever a Book of Mormon in a hotel room. So I'm digging through the hotel drawers. Any guesses what brand of hotel it
Welcome
was?
to Marriott.
Yep, welcome to Marriott. And so I was able to get my hands on Book of Mormon, and then I get to the end of my time there, and I'm like, is it bad to steal a religious text? Like, if you're gonna steal something, is it better or worse that it's a religious text? And I was like,
That's amazing.
well, I was like, I'll leave it. I'll figure out a different way to find one. So went back to
Oh, you're
Chicago,
such a good person.
went to like, I think back then it was Mormon.org, something like that, and filled out a thing in order to get a free copy of the Book of Mormon. And I figured it would come via the mail, MAIL, but instead it came via mails, MALE. Two missionaries showed up at my door, and that, they started teaching me about the church, and I right away I was like, this makes sense, this is true, this is the word of God. And so then at the same time I was moving, I was planning on joining that PhD program in Rochester. And so long story short, ended up flying to Utah to be baptized by my friend who'd introduced me to the church. Went to general conference the next day, then went home to Minnesota for a little bit. My family was not happy about me choosing to join the church, and then went out to Rochester to start the PhD program there. And we can pause there, see if you have any questions or want me to fill in any blanks there. And then there's
Well,
more.
I appreciate that, because I mainly, just for the audience, there's some things that I'm an active learner, my friends, and I love to learn as I go. One of the things that really caught my attention about your story is that you had that kneeling down experience where you didn't know where to go. You didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And all these little bitty steps, that it took. It wasn't like, oh, here's an instant answer for you. Like,
Yep.
oh, let me solve all your life problems at the same time. Right. Because I'm sure we all have good, bad, and ugly that comes before and after stories as well. But it's something that I talk to my entrepreneurs about. And then I talk in my interviews, like, look, if somebody wanted to know what my greatest secret weapon was, and what's the biggest secret to my success, for anybody who's not religious, it's called meditation. And for anybody who's
Mhm.
religious, it's called prayer. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what we call it, as long as we realize that we have access to other powers that so many people don't lean into. And if we lean into that reality, we can uncover truths that help our lives and that create stability and peace and that allow us to get centered around what we can do. It doesn't make our life easier per se. In fact, I don't think my life is easier by any means, but there's a fulfillment to what I have. There's a concrete feeling of like what I do every day, I can be proud of, and I can be at peace with that. And my visionary friends, I hope that you get the same exact experience with your visions and what you're trying to build purposefully. So, and keep going. This is great.
Yeah. So I get to Rochester. I'm in their PhD program, toxicology. It's great. I really like it. But eventually I kind of get that unsettled feeling. And ironically, a few years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So maybe that played into some of this as well. But
Sure.
I got, like about a year or so into it. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this either. And I don't know if I want the jobs that come with this degree. I was like, I saw how hard my advisors worked and how dependent they were upon making sure they're getting all these grants and all these different things. And so I am kind of like, well, I've been a
You
member of the
said
church.
hard, and I'm going to
Go ahead.
interrupt on this one because
Yeah.
one, I love the fact that you respect your advisors and you don't have to reveal any truths. Because I'm going to point out, my friends, if you've ever seen advisors in the medical space or even a nurse, uh, the bags under the eyes, the worn out nature, the families that they miss, the kids they don't get to spend time with. There's so much demand and pressure on them. We're not talking about hard work at this point. We're talking about virtual, like borderline abuse, with what they have to put themselves through in order to provide. And it would be great to be able to be a nurse or a practitioner and have balance, but that often doesn't happen in those careers. So I hope I don't discourage you from being a doctor, but if you're going to go that route, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a medical professional, look to do things to create a more holistic environment for yourself and for others. And honestly, the AMA blew it. I'm going to go on a tangent. The AMA blew it in the 1980s, I believe it was. The president of the AMA and the whole organization decided that we did not need more doctors in the United States, that there were plenty of doctors. You can research, you guys can research this with Claude. Maybe what I found years ago isn't true, but I was about 10 years ago when I studied this, because I was also way before that. I was in the National Youth Leadership Forum for Medicine, and I wanted to become a doctor and I wanted to solve the
Yeah.
cancer problem, etc. I was very excited about it. And so I studied in high school in that process before I decided to move into other areas. But the AMA decided that they didn't need to launch more schools and programs for universities for doctors, but they grossly underestimated the medical needs that exist in the world and
Mhm.
exist in America. And that's why one of the big reasons why our medical expenses and healthcare system is so atrocious, because they screwed it up. We've got to fix it. And so don't abandon medicine, but please recognize that it's one thing to value hard work. It's another to work yourself into a position to where you're not you're not processing life and enjoying the journey. That's just my personal opinion. Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, 100%. And the importance of being intentional with that as your whatever career choice you're making, like making sure you're intentionally kind of compartmentalizing
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing, what your family needs, what other ventures you have going on. Um, but yeah, so I kind of started to feel a little disheartened about this idea of this PhD program. And so I thought, well, maybe I should go on a mission. That'd be a great excuse to quit this grad school program. And so I prayed about it. No answer. Like, no, you shouldn't go. Or it wasn't, I don't think it was a no. I'd say it was more like a no answer type thing. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm quitting
How
school.
old were you at
Like
the time?
I was, let's see, I was 24, 25. So
Okay, so yeah,
older,
you're like in the middle
older.
or at the end of the path that a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, hey, you need to know, like all the pressure's coming at those ages. And it's like, you need to be doing what you need to be doing for the rest of your life. That's what society tried to teach us back then. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And kind of on top of this, kind of an overview is I'm an only grandchild on one side. And my grandmother on that side had been calling me Dr. Anne since I was 5 years old because I had asked her about being a doctor. And she was like, yes, girls can be doctors too. She was kind of a feminist in her own way.
So
And so um, there was a lot of like, honestly, I think she was trying to encourage me and allow me to see that I had the possibilities that she didn't have in the society she
right.
grew up in. But in some ways, it also felt like pressure. And so the
Yeah, yeah,
idea
yeah.
of turning away from
Sure.
this PhD program was tricky. So I decided I was going to
Mhm.
quit. After I decided I was going to quit, I was like, well, maybe now I should think about serving a mission. And it was amazing. I lived in Rochester. So I was like, I'll just drive over to the Sacred Grove, an important church history site over in Rochester or in Palmyra, New
Mhm.
York, and say a prayer there. And I felt I should go. And so I reached out
So I'm going
to
to pick
my,
that apart a little bit. So
yeah, go for it.
you first had to take your own actions, right?
Yep.
And so it's not like we're just relying on God to make all of our decisions for ourselves, but you chose to take a couple of actions on your own that were very big actions, and take that risk and that step of faith, as we'll call it, action your belief, and that led to, and then you decided to go seek spiritual guidance in a place that facilitated where it's easy to, like anybody listening in, go into a football stadium, like a soccer stadium, where they're blowing on horns and stuff, and and try like there to get a soft answer from anybody, let alone a deity.
Yeah.
It can happen, but that's not setting yourself up for success. If you're going to meditate, and you guys know this, like, go to the Calm or the Headspace app and lean into meditation. It will guide you on, you really want to create an environment where you can really hear and feel the power, not be distracted by a bunch of things. And so that's neat. Okay, continue, Ann.
Yeah. And so then I felt like, and I was so grateful that I had decided to quit school and then go, because I didn't know my family would be upset about it. I mean, I kind of thought they might be. But then when they came back and they were so mad at me for choosing to go on a mission, they're like, you're throwing away any intelligence you ever had. I can't believe you're leaving this program in order to do this. And I could honestly say I didn't leave the program in order to do this. I was leaving the program anyway. So I was grateful that I'd
True.
had to take that step to move forward. Um,
I'm sure
but
all
that,
of us can relate to having such uplifting family members in our lives.
yeah,
Most of us, it happens, but way to stick to your resilience and recognize your source. Okay.
yeah, and it was tricky because my family wasn't really super supportive about me choosing to serve. So I didn't have, I didn't get like the letters or emails or anything like that from them very much. But I was great.
Mm,
I had my little branch, my little congregation in upstate New York of just a small group of 18 to 30-year-olds who just jumped in and were so
we're loving
supportive and
too.
helpful and did all of the things. And so then I will fast forward a little bit. I get on my mission and
Visionaries too, real quick. I'm going
yeah,
to tie this back into all of you, because your friends and family members too, when you're pursuing a vision, something that you feel purposely driven by, they're going to come and attack that because they're scared of you failing. And they're worried about what's going to happen to you. And so it often comes from a misplaced sense of love. I think it's still love, though. They're trying to protect you from what you're trying to do. And they're probably a little bit bummed about their own dreams and their own ambitions that they didn't get to pursue and didn't get to have. And so that isn't about you as much as it's about them. And at the same time, recognize that, like, that's kind of what everybody who's pursued something great has had to go through, is there's all this doubt and there's all this fear that exists. And so having that support group, super helpful. My stepdad went through the same thing that you did, Ann, to a certain degree. He was baptized at 17, and when he decided to go on a mission, his father fired him from work so that he couldn't afford to
mm,
go, and he had to find
oh
another
yeah,
way to figure out how to go.
hmm
So but again, visionaries, it's going to happen to all of us as we pursue something that other people are like, "Who are you to do this?" Or "Why do you think you have the powers to pull this off?" So find people who can support and lift you and inspire you, and allow those people to become pseudo family, if you will. Let them pour that love in, because as visionaries, we need that type of support. Continue, Ann.
yeah. And I think kind of what you're saying. I was so grateful. One of those people said, "Hey, he'd done a similar thing. He joined the church, went on mission without family support, and he's like, be prepared for some blowback from family or friends or whoever." And I think that's good advice for any stage of life, entrepreneurship or whatever it may be, that there's going to be some pushback, and sometimes by people who you respect their opinion. And you nailed it there. It is out of love. It's this desire to try and protect you and keep you safe. So I got on my mission, and kind of at the end of my mission, I was like, well, now where do I go? Because it didn't make sense to go back to Rochester. Definitely didn't make sense to go back to Minnesota. So I was trying to decide, and wasn't quite sure. And there was one particular morning, and remember very vividly, like where we were and all the different things. I had this impression come to my mind that I would be guided and directed, because I would know what to do, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be right then. And I thought, well, how do you know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be? And it was, I know you, and I know your heart, and I knew that you would make the decisions that would allow you to be an instrument in my hands. And so that phrase came into my head, and I was like, huh, prayer answered, that prayer that I'd said in
Wow.
Chicago, wanting to be an instrument. And it's only expanded from there, right? So I came home from my mission, started a few different things, eventually decided to go to pharmacy school. So I finally got my doctorate. My grandma was still alive when I graduated. So it was so special because she could finally call me Dr. Anne. It was a really kind of sweet moment.
So cool.
Um, and so got my doctorate in pharmacy school. And then at the time, when I graduated from pharmacy school, I was pregnant and we were planning on moving from Utah up to Idaho. And so we get up to Idaho and I'm working a little bit here and there, but we had a newborn and my husband was, he was a medical lab tech. So he was working for a hospital system up here. And then he was like, maybe I should go to pharmacy school too. And I was like, okay, like sounds great. So he decided he'd go to pharmacy school as well. And then I became the breadwinner while he was in school. And so he did, kind of the childcare, taking care of all of those things while I worked. And then after he finished school, then it was my turn to step back. And at that point, we had 2 kids. And so then I was able to kind of focus on family again, but my brain didn't shut off, right? Like just because all of a sudden now I'm at home, I was still thinking and having worked in a variety of different pharmacy settings. So I'd worked in inpatient pharmacy, outpatient, surgical, long-term care, just kind of covered the whole
Oh, wow.
gamut. And I'd seen all these problems that were happening, and it made me mad that we didn't do more for people with the resources we have available. And so I kind of, had some ideas rolling around in my head for a while, and then eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And so I was like, I want to start a company. So I started a company. It's called Effective. And what it does is it does patient engagement and medication management in an asynchronous text message based process. So you could think of it this way. So a patient starts a new medication and then they'll get, depending on what the medication is, that will determine the cadence, but patients will get a text message with a link asking them very simple check-in questions about like satisfaction, efficacy, side effects, adherence, as well as social determinants of health. And then we have built into it a critical lab value. Essentially, it's like a trigger alert to go to the provider. So if a patient response indicates that they need some help, it will trigger an alert to the provider so the provider can step in rather than waiting however many months until a follow-up appointment. And
Huge.
so I was like, we need to do more. As both professionally as well as personally, I'd get calls from friends who are like, hey, I started taking this thing and now this weird stuff's happening. Do you think it's from my medication? And I was like, why can't we do better? Why can't we support people better? And so it was this idea of wanting to really work at finding a way to make a positive impact. And as we've been developing it, I loved what you'd said before about, the burnout. We wanted to make something that would make it easier for clinicians because they've got enough going on and they've got enough documentation, all the different things. So we're like, having worked on the front lines, we're like, okay, what can we do in order to make it a little bit easier on your side? Make it so you can because alert fatigue is real, right? And so making sure that they're getting the alerts only when it's necessary. And there's easy ways to access all the other information if they want it. But that was something we had, at the forefront of our minds as well. Is one, we want to help patients, but two, we want to do it in a way that one is like easily implementable, but also not an added stress for the providers.
Absolutely. Do you have a couple extra minutes or do you need to run? You have a hard stop.
I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. We won't go too long, but I want to make sure that there's some elements I want to add into this because it's one, this has been one of the most uplifting episodes we've ever had. And so that's exciting. And I hope, and I'll talk a little bit more about your podcast with that, but I want to stick on this topic of pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, medicines, etc. This is one of the greatest problems in hospitals to this day, my friends, is mixing up of medicines. And people ended up getting the wrong dosage or the wrong medicine completely. And it's one of the greatest reasons why people die in hospitals still. And you can look that up on Claude or ChatGPT and see what the stats are modernly. I learned about this back in 2004 or 5. I think it was 2004 when I went to the National Youth Leadership Forum for Medicine in Houston, and we got to I mean, I took it for granted. Looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, they had a robot in this hospital that was a giant square box that could just barely fit through the doors. And this robot was designed to take people their medicines, and it had lock protections on the different boxes.
Hmm.
And it was very, very AI driven. I didn't think about that until right now when we were talking. That holy crap, they were way ahead back then on all the AI stuff. And it's amazing to me. It's in a negative way. It's like, how do we not have that in the hospitals all throughout at least the United States? And what's taken so long to improve the technology to the point where we can eliminate those liabilities when malpractice and lawsuits are one of the greatest hindrances to professionals who practice in the space. So it blows my mind. I'm glad that you're working on it and seeing it and moving towards that. And I hope we have more people leaning into that. The other couple of things I want to share real quick. One, I'm going to pull up Anne's podcast. So tell us about Pebbles of Light. I see that you do some interviews on here as well.
Yep.
And yeah, let's hear all about the podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast started in like 2019. It was kind of had been rolling around in my head, this desire to share, just uplifting stories with others. And I had taught at BYU Idaho Education Week and had a few different experiences and written articles for different magazines and websites and stuff like that. And so I thought, oh, like a podcast would be a great way to share some of my insights as well as the insights of others. And I am much more of an introvert and prefer to be behind the camera or at least do an interview. So it's not all just me. But so the podcast kind of started with that idea and then kind of took off, did it for a couple of years. And then everything with Effective, with our patient engagement platform, started to get really busy. And so I kind of had to put it on the back burner for a couple of years. And then interestingly, last fall, sometime, my kids were talking to me and they're like, Mom, if you could have any job in the world, like, what would you want to do? And I was like, well, what's my goal of the job? Is my goal to make money? Is my goal to have impact? Is my goal to do something that feels fulfilling? And they're like, kind of a mix, whatever it is you want to do. And I was like, well, I would love to just interview people and just talk to people and get to know them and hear their experiences. And obviously that's a tricky one as far as the making money side of it. But I was like, why am I not doing that? Like, I have time to do a podcast. Why am I not, putting the podcast out there and giving myself those opportunities to just connect with people, interview people, hear their stories, share their stories. And so that's why I kind of came back at the beginning of this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the monetization aspect. It's a lot like algebra. If we don't have a lot of training on math, then algebra is hard. It's like, I don't think I'll ever learn this. But if we have a lot of training on it, algebra is formulaic. Like you can move through it fast. The same is true with the monetization aspect, but it's a little bit more complicated in math. It's more like music, where you can choose like heavy metal rock music that makes you feel kind of like hyped up and different, or you can choose like melodies that align more with spiritual grace. And so the same is true with how we lean into what we do to make money. So my podcasting friends out there, you can be making a whole lot of money on podcasting, but you do need an infrastructure and you do need a team and you do need the strategies and you need to understand how they do it. And it's helpful to work with people who've been there. So a little bit of background on that. I did work with John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire back when I was at Video Power Marketing. And we worked with Lewis Howes of School of Greatness on his podcast. And we worked with Dr. Eric Berg, who now has 14 million subscribers worldwide, and Michael Hyatt and T. Harv Eckert, et cetera. And so when you get to see behind the scenes of so many different successful individuals in the process, you start to learn all the algebra equations and realize, oh, cool, there are formulas people can follow on this. So one final note on that Jake Larson inspired me of, by the way. So Jake Larson, for those who don't know, he is known as the YouTube ad expert of the world. Ryan Dice put him on stage, traffic conversion, years ago, and called him that. That's the owner of Digital Market, well, the former owner of digitalmarketer.com. He sold it since. But Jake is one of my absolute greatest mentors and favorite people on this planet. He was originally my mission companion in Uruguay. He was my second companion. And so for any of you who've ever had a boss that you absolutely loved, and then the boss leaves and there's another guy who comes in, Jake was the other guy. I was so brutal and hard on Jake, and he loved me anyway. And he helped me figure things out. I later got to apologize for him about that. But when he was getting ready to launch Video Power Marketing, he called me up and he said, Jackson, you're one of the most critical people I've ever met in my life, and I need your feedback. To which I said, I'm sorry. I was like, I don't want to give you any feedback anymore. You're right. I was awful to you. I was like, I think I ruined our friendship. And he's like, no, you're good. But I was like, I really need your feedback. And so he asked me, if he should launch a startup. And um, I said, Jake, 6 months ago, I would have told you yes. Like, but you'd have to be crazy to launch a company. It's freaking hard.
Yeah.
And then he affirms like, no, I can do that. I'm crazy. And I said, okay, my only other rule, Jake, you don't get it. You have to be nuts. You get to be crazy. It is, you don't understand how hard it is. And I walked him through that. And then he's like, no, I'm going to, I was like, okay, tell me your story. And he said, the founder of YouTube called him on the phone and asked him to represent YouTube ads. And I was like, you should definitely start a company. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
happen. And so he became one of the 10 ambassadors. And through that process, I watched Jake and I was thinking about his progress and my progress with my different ventures. And I did a lot of the hard things to grow my businesses. And I thought I was doing things wrong. I was just learning things that I needed for my life. It's fun to look back in hindsight. But within 6 months, Ryan Dice put him on stage, called him YouTube ad expert. His producer, Travis Chambers, did the #1 YouTube ad of the decade with Kobe Bryant, Lionel Messi on Turkish Airlines. They produced hit after hit after hit. I later joined him. And we were talking about our experiences and life having been missionaries. And he said, I would never go back to knocking doors. He said, but I would run YouTube ads for the church. I would do that. And sure enough, church headquarters asked him to come out and teach them how to run YouTube ads, which is kind of funny. But I continued to think about my own presence and purpose as a visionary and how to increase sphere of influence. It became one of my like obsessions for a year or two is sphere of influence and how that worked. And I thought about LeBron James. And I thought about how I could go and knock doors until I'm 65 years old every single day of my life. And in that 40-year span, if LeBron James decided to get baptized in any church whatsoever, in 1 hour, he would have more influence on the world and more power to help people convert towards whatever his belief might be than I would knocking doors for 40 years. How the heck does that work? And like I said, I became kind of obsessed with the idea. And my friends, here's a formula that's in my morning formula routine. I put that in air quotes because I don't read this every day, but I did for a long, long time. And my ultimate discovery in this was the world needs me to be my best self, which goes hand in hand with what Anne's prayer was. I learned to stop trying to be better than others. I learned to focus on just being my best self so I could open up my best life. And it doesn't matter if that's worse or better than others. Who are we to judge? I just need to be my best. And being a dad is far more important to me than being a businessman. But right here, these phrases, your sphere of influence, visionary, determines the extent of your impact on this world. And your impact will be what you make of it. And maximum preparation and maximum sacrifice is required for maximum impact. Does that mean we're all designed for maximum impact? No, it doesn't. But that's ultimately the formula of what would be required if we wanted to create maximum impact in this life. And whether you choose to use this life to carry the cross, or you choose to use this life to be a light on the hill, or you choose this life to do whatever you want, that goes back to your vision. You're in control of that. We're just providing some insights into what has worked for Anne and what has worked for me. We're going to wrap up now. Anne, I'd love for you to have the final message. If this was the last chance you had to give counsel to visionaries, what would it be?
Well, one thing just to kind of add to what you were saying as
You can
well
add
is
first, for sure. We'll live back.
part of effective, and you'll get this, with the work that you do, is one of the goals is to develop kind of a nonprofit arm, because we feel like this is something that is needed in those underserved populations, those people who aren't seen. And so one of my goals, whether it's through the podcast or through effective or whatever, is to help people to feel seen and known and loved, and give them opportunities to do the same for others. As far as visionaries, I think one of the most important things that I've learned as an entrepreneur is to not look at what you haven't achieved yet, to look back and see all that you've done and what you've learned along the way. It's not always necessarily the KPIs and all the metrics that you look at, but think about the intangibles that you've gained. I was telling someone the other day about how, like, if we had to walk away from this business venture, like I wouldn't go back and not start it. I've learned so much from, whether that's just different skill sets or networking or different things, but to recognize that if you have a vision, it's important that you take time to really focus on what you can do to achieve that, and just 3 small steps each day. Just take 3 small steps each day to try and figure out what are the 3 small things I can do today to move forward.
I love that. And as your strength grows, my friends, you can take more and more steps. And so balance that with, of course, what we talked about earlier, the fundamentals of life and understanding what you want. I want to validate what Anne said before we wrap up, because she talked about the more you give, the more you get, by talking about adding in some type of nonprofit or some type of cause. It does not have to be a nonprofit. I don't do nonprofits, but the water project mentioned, they're nonprofit. That's great for them. I do believe in giving back, though. And MailChimp, their profit grew 650% in 1 year, and the strategy was giving it away. And this whole article that just launched on the blog, we have a brand new blog, go.firstclassbusiness.io. I put some of my absolute best work into this, and thanks to Claude and AI, I literally launched the entire blog with 19 phenomenal articles over the weekend.
Wow.
And that, yes, and this is, I'm telling you, my friends, these are world class articles. And that's why AI Mavericks up here, some of my mentors, and the AI Marketplace, which we've launched to open the doors, also models these same experiences. You can join as a founding member for $50 a month or $500 lifetime access for the first 50. But more importantly, there's a grant program. For those of you who were like, I don't want to invest in this, or I can't yet, just apply for a grant. It's right under the part that says where the payment is. Just click the little link, apply for the grant. Just like any scholarship, there are rules to that grant process. If you follow the very simple rules related to that, you're welcome to be an honorary member of the AI Marketplace. We don't want anybody left behind in the new world of AI. We want all of you to be empowered for it. And as Anne magically pointed out, the nice thing is it leads to our abundance as well. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Again, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, not just to my channel, but to Pebbles of Light. Go check that out. If you like this uplifting interview, you can get more of that by going and following Anne's podcast as well. And we'll see you on the other side. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.